Welcome back, Fast Timers, to the Fast Times News. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe, and share this deep dive with your friends. Today, we're going to be tackling a topic that has really got everyone talking. President Trump's tariffs on Mexico, Canada, and China. Buckle up, because this deep dive is going to unpack what happened, why it matters to you, and what could happen next.
What's interesting here is how these tariffs, they seem to be about more than just trade.
Yeah,
It's a bit of a puzzle, wouldn't you say?
you're right. It's like a game of chess
Yeah.
with global consequences. We're talking 25% tariffs on goods from Mexico and Canada and 10% on those coming from China. But before we get into the strategy, let's make sure everyone understands the playing field.
Right.
So for those who need a refresher, what exactly are tariffs and how do they impact our wallets?
Think of a tariff as a tax, but specifically on imported goods. Let's say you're at the grocery store and suddenly avocados from Mexico cost 25% more because of these tariffs. That's the direct effect. But then things get more complex because these costs often trickle down. Maybe the grocery store has to raise prices on other items to compensate.
Sure.
Or maybe your favorite restaurant uses imported ingredients and has to adjust its menu pricing. You might not always see the tariff directly, but you'll likely feel it somewhere along the line.
So that brings us to the big question.
Yeah.
Why did President Trump make this move? What's the objective here?
President Trump argues that these tariffs are a way to pressure Mexico and Canada to strengthen border security and to address fentanyl trafficking.
Okay.
The interesting thing is that he's using the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEPA, to do it.
Now, the IEPA isn't exactly your everyday tool for trade disagreements, is it?
You're right.
Okay.
It's typically reserved for situations like imposing sanctions on countries that pose a direct threat to national security. Using it to implement tariffs on our closest trading partners is a controversial move. Some legal experts even suggest it might not hold up in court,
Oh, wow.
which adds another layer of complexity to this whole situation.
And speaking of complexity, let's not forget about the responses from Canada, Mexico, and China.
Right.
Swift retaliation was the phrase used in one of the articles you sent me, and that doesn't sound too friendly.
It definitely signals that they're ready to fight back. Canada wasted no time hitting back with their own 25% tariffs, targeting American products like whiskey and apples.
Interesting.
Mexico is imposing retaliatory tariffs as well, and China is exploring countermeasures, which could even include filing a lawsuit with the World Trade Organization. It's like a chain reaction, and each action seems to provoke an even stronger response.
It sounds like a trade war is brewing, and it's making everyone nervous.
Yeah.
What I'm wondering is, how is this going to impact us, the everyday people?
Right.
Are we really going to see our grocery bills and car payments skyrocket?
Unfortunately, yes. The potential for price increases is very real. Take the auto industry, for example. It's a highly integrated market in North America, with parts crossing borders multiple times during production.
Right.
Now imagine tariffs added at each stage. That cost gets passed along, and you could easily see the price of a new car going up by thousands of dollars.
That's a scary thought, especially for those of you saving up for a new car. And it's not just cars. Think about all the other products we rely on that involve imports.
Right.
You mentioned avocados earlier. A Yale University study estimated that the average household could lose over $11,170 in income because of these tariffs.
Wow.
That's a big chunk of change.
It is. And that's just the direct impact. There's also the potential for something called stagflation,
Uh-oh.
which is a pretty nasty combination of stagnant economic growth and high inflation.
Right.
Imagine prices going up, but your wages staying the same. That's a recipe for economic hardship.
Not a happy picture.
No.
And of course, this has become a political football, with Democrats like Chuck Schumer criticizing the tariffs as harmful to the economy.
Schumer's criticism reflects a broader concern that these tariffs might be more about political maneuvering than sound economic policy. It's a valid concern, and it raises the question, are these tariffs a temporary tactic, or are they signaling a more fundamental shift in U.S. trade policy?
That's a question we'll explore further as we continue our deep dive. But before we move on, I want to remind all of you watching to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and share this video with your friends. Let's get this conversation going.
Welcome back to the Fast Times News deep dive into this potential trade war that's been sparked by President Trump's tariffs.
So far we've kind of explored like what triggered this whole situation, right? But now it's time to look ahead and consider how this trade war might actually play out. Like, who stands to lose the most?
Yeah, we've already touched on the potential for rising prices
Sure.
and disrupted supply chains, but let's zoom in on a specific industry that's particularly vulnerable, the auto industry.
Yeah, one of the articles that you sent me was highlighting just how interconnected the North American auto industry is.
Oh, it's incredible.
Parts
Wow.
often cross borders multiple times
Yeah.
before a car is fully assembled.
Right.
How will these tariffs impact that, like, delicate dance?
It's like adding hurdles to a relay race.
Okay.
Each time a part crosses the border, it potentially faces a tariff. This adds significant costs to each step of the manufacturing process,
Oh.
ultimately driving up the final price of vehicles.
And analysts are predicting that car prices could rise by thousands of dollars because of this.
Easily, yeah.
It's not just an inconvenience. It could make cars unaffordable for a lot of people.
Exactly. And it's not just the sticker price that's affected. If fewer people can afford new cars, sales will drop. That could lead to job losses in both manufacturing and sales. It's a ripple effect that could hurt the entire industry.
So what can be done to, prevent this economic damage? Are there any potential solutions on the table?
Negotiation is always a possibility. The U.S. could engage in talks with Canada, Mexico, and China to try and find a compromise. Perhaps they could agree to, reduce or phase out the tariffs, gradually easing the pressure on businesses and consumers.
That sounds like the most sensible approach.
Right.
What are the chances of that happening, though?
It's hard to say at this point. All sides have kind of dug in their heels and are defending their positions. But the potential economic consequences of a prolonged trade war are significant. So hopefully cooler heads will prevail and a diplomatic solution can be found.
Let's keep our fingers crossed. But what if those negotiations fail? What other options are there?
Legal challenges are almost certain. Several groups are already preparing to challenge the legality of using the IEPA to impose these tariffs. If those challenges are successful, it could force the Trump administration to reconsider its approach.
So the courts could potentially intervene and, change the course of this trade war.
Absolutely. The judicial system could play a crucial role in determining the legality of these tariffs. And even if the tariffs are eventually rolled back or struck down, the damage might already be done. The uncertainty and instability created by this whole situation could have lasting impacts on business investment, consumer confidence, and global trade flows.
It seems like we're kind of standing at a crossroads here.
Yeah.
And the decisions that are made in these coming weeks and months
Absolutely.
will determine which path we take.
For sure.
This situation truly highlights how interconnected our world is and how actions taken in one country can ripple outward and affect everyone.
Precisely. This trade war is a stark reminder that we need international cooperation and diplomacy more than ever. Trade wars rarely have winners. In the end, everyone ends up paying a price.
It's a sobering thought. And it's easy to get lost in the abstract talk of economics and politics. But let's not forget about, the human element here.
Yeah, of course.
These tariffs aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet.
Right.
They're going to have real-world consequences for people's lives.
You're absolutely right. Think about the farmers who rely on exporting their crops to Mexico and Canada. Think about the small businesses that depend on imported goods from China to keep their doors open. These tariffs could put their livelihoods at risk.
It's a stark reminder that economic policy decisions have human consequences.
Absolutely.
And those consequences need to be carefully considered before they're just implemented. Before we jump into the final part of this deep dive, I want to remind everyone watching to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and share this video with your friends. The more informed we all are, the better equipped we'll be to navigate these turbulent times. Welcome back to the Fast Times News for the final part of our deep dive into this potential trade war. We've looked at kind of the immediate impacts, but now let's step back and consider the long-term consequences of this economic standoff.
What's fascinating here is how these tariffs might actually reshape the global landscape. They seem to be accelerating a shift away from these free trade agreements that have defined global economics for decades, pushing us toward a new era of protectionism.
So could this be the beginning of a global trade war free-for-all?
Yeah.
Are we headed for a future where countries isolate themselves economically?
It's a real possibility. If these tariffs remain in place and other countries retaliate with protectionist measures of their own, it could lead to a fragmentation of global trade.
Oh, wow. That would likely slow down economic growth worldwide, and it's hard to predict what the ultimate outcome would be.
Yeah, one of the sources that you sent me mentioned the World Trade Organization, or WTO.
Right.
What role could they play in all of this?
The WTO was designed to be the referee of global trade, promoting free trade and resolving trade disputes between nations. We're already seeing China gearing up to file a complaint against the U.S. tariffs with the WTO, and other countries could follow suit.
So the WTO could step in and mediate this conflict, potentially forcing a resolution.
That's the hope. However, the WTO's effectiveness has been hampered in recent years.
Okay.
Political gridlock and the rise of protectionist sentiment around the world have made it harder for the WTO to enforce international trade rules. It remains to be seen whether they have the clout to bring all parties to the table and find a solution that works for everyone.
It sounds like we're at a crossroads. The decisions made in the coming weeks and months could have far-reaching consequences, not just for the global economy, but for international relations as a whole. This situation is a wake-up call. It highlights just how interconnected our world really is and how vital international cooperation is to solving global challenges. Retreating into economic isolationism is a lose-lose scenario. It's in everyone's best interest to find common ground and work together.
It's a reminder that we need to be informed and engaged citizens, holding our leaders accountable for making responsible decisions that benefit everyone, not just a select few. Before we wrap up, I want to remind everyone to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and share this video with your friends.
This trade war is a complex issue, and understanding the potential consequences is crucial for all of us. We've only scratched the surface here.
Right.
There's so much more to learn and explore. Stay curious, stay engaged, and keep asking questions.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the potential trade war. We hope you found it informative and thought-provoking. Be informed and stay empowered.